Welcome to the Wilderness Attitude Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Waddell. I hope everybody's having a great day. Hope everybody's striving to better themselves and get out there and take the world by storm. And if not, then you can live vicariously through our series in Alaska. The last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been getting to know these men and women from Alaska and the different things that they do for work there and what they do playing there. And it's just been amazing learning about Alaska, some little things here and there, learning about these people, learning about what makes them tick, what makes Alaska so great. And I really hope that you guys are enjoying this Alaska trip that we're on. I know that for myself, thinking about the podcast that I've had and the people we've interviewed here, Alaska's, you don't want to overglorify Alaska, right? But I mean, Alaska is epic. Alaska is that next step, right, for anything. I mean, rafting, backcountry skiing, fishing, hunting, sightseeing. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a hunter or not or whatever. That Alaska is amazing. For me, listening to some of these stories, these people that all grew up there, man, these people are hardcore. They're badass, right? I mean, they're gritty. But it sure has kind of opened my eyes to who I am down here in the lower 48, man. Like, I kind of feel like a pansy compared to some of these people. I mean, I'm not so sure about doing a solo coastal brown bear hunt on Kodiak Island with a muzzleloader. I'm not so, that gives me the chills thinking about it. I don't think I got cojones big enough for that. But these stories have opened my mindset to getting myself mentally prepared better and physically prepared better, and really challenging the wilderness to challenge me back a little bit more here where I live in Colorado and around my areas here, because I don't know if I'm ready for that Alaska adventure. I mean, I think I am, but there's a lot of people who think they are who aren't. So I hope that these Alaskan podcasts have sparked your interest. Maybe if you're not going to make it to Alaska and hunt or go there to fish or whatever, maybe it's opened your eyes that, man, I need to do better here. I need to be better every day. And the other aspect to these men and women that we've interviewed, man, have you noticed this theme of how selfless they are and how they love to give to people and how they love to empower people and how they love to watch people grow and become their dream? It just seems like they're great people. I can't wait to meet them in person, shake their hands, and get to know them a little bit more. And as you've heard in the podcast, I'm trying to figure out how to trade hunts. I'm trying to figure out how I can manage to get into a Dall Sheep hunt, because I don't know. I don't have 15 grand laying around. I don't know about you. So I don't know how we're going to get it done, but we're sure as heck going to try some point in time. Enjoy these podcasts. These men and women are great. Kick back, tune in, and enjoy. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here on Wilderness Attitude Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Waddell. We are coming to you live on Facebook. We have a great guest lined up for you today, and I think you will find this gentleman to be truly amazing. He is our 4th guest in our series that we're doing on Alaska, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed the prior shows that we've had. So today we're going to be speaking with Kevin Dana. He's born and raised a lifelong Alaskan. He grew up hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, backcountry skiing, and pretty much anything outdoors. First and foremost, he is a new father, husband. He also owns a shop up in Alaska, and he is a Sitka gear ambassador. He started packing for a hunting outfitter in the Brooks Range when he was 18 and worked as an assistant guide for 5 years. As an assistant guide, he specialized in Dall Sheep hunts north of the Arctic Circle in some of Alaska's most vast and rugged country. During that time, in the off-season, he worked in a specialized hunting store located in Anchorage, Alaska, called Barney's Sports Chalet, which is the one he now owns. over the last 15 years, he's been part of countless Dall sheep, mountain goat, grizzly, brown bear, mountain caribou, and moose hunts. But I think some other cool things to know about Kevin is that I think he's an amazing photographer. Everything that he shoots, I think he has a great eye for. And then he's a pretty amazing backcountry skier, I understand as well. So we'll get a little bit more out of him on that. But Kevin, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking time out of your day to be with us. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing great. I had got up at 5 o'clock this morning, went to the gym and got in a workout, and went and helped the daughter buy a car or a truck rather, and then I've been running amok trying to get here so I could meet you. So
Right on.
it's a good day so far. So Kevin, I got to get right into the new baby, Wyatt. She is beautiful. Like everybody wants to hear the hunting stuff. We want to dive into that, but
Right.
Your daughter is beautiful. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she's definitely a handful, but yeah, she's pretty cool. It's our first child, so definitely a learning experience. Very humbling, but yes, very fortunate to have so far. Knock on wood. She's healthy. She's very energetic. She has quite the personality for sure.
That's great. Now she's getting close to a year old, right? So she's on the move, isn't she?
Yeah, she's. I think she took a couple steps here the other day, so it's borderline about time to start the race, I think.
That's awesome. Well, I've got 9 kids, and they all do this at a different time when they take off. But it's a pretty amazing thing watching something grow up and get to that point of walking. And I know that through some of the research I've done on you that you're really looking forward to showing her this amazing country that you live in and all that it has to offer. So watching her take her first steps, it's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. We're jumping on an airplane here early next week, and we're going to be taking her down to Southeast Alaska. We're going to be doing a blacktail hunt, my wife and I, and it's going to be mainly my wife's hunt, but she's going to be with us, so it'll be an interesting week. But she'll be in the backpack, and we got some earmuffs for her, and we're just going to give it a whirl.
So you guys going to trade off the pack, or is that going to be daddy duty?
Well, we'll see. I feel kind of bad. My wife, she loves to hunt. She loves to fish. She loves to be outdoors. I mean, hence why I'm with her essentially. But we both grew up here, so this year having the baby and kind of recovering from that, and then she's a registered nurse. She works at the hospital 3 days a week, so she was right back at it. And she really kind of missed out on a lot of fishing and hunting this fall, and summer. So this is kind of like a last little hoorah for her this year to try to kind of, rejuvenate that going into wintertime spirit of, I actually got out and did something this year. So we'll see. I'm all about her, harvesting a few things if possible. If we're lucky enough to get a deer, great. Otherwise, we're just going to have a great time. And it's all
Right.
about kind of getting our daughter out there and just doing it.
Well, it sounds like an amazing family adventure and one that you'll remember for a long time, and obviously well deserved. I mean, motherhood and fatherhood brings on a lot of challenges, and in the beginning it can be a daunting task. I mean, and to be able to go out there and kind of make this about your wife a little bit and focus on her and really lift her up and do it as a family will be awesome. I'm sure whether you're successful or not, right? It'll be good.
Right. It's just the adventure for sure.
So now you're sitting in the back shop of Barney's sports. What is it called?
So yeah, the store's name is Barney's Sports Chalet.
There you go.
Yeah, it was founded in 1963, so it's been in the same location since 1963. Started as a small little cross country ski distribution center and slash store. The owner was Barney Seiler, and I think in '85, the my mentor Bob Hodson bought the store from Barney and kind of integrated in his little, he was more of a hunting guy. Granted, he did the cross country ski thing as well, but kind of turned it into more of what it is today, and really just kind of gave me a foundation to run with. And here about 3 years ago, he was kind enough to sit down with me and discuss, the future of the store, and we got our contract and sale kind of in place. And he's still involved today with if I need questions, we talk daily. I mean, for a guy that's ran a successful small business for 30 plus years, I couldn't ask for a better mentor. So I keep him readily involved in just about everything I do, and not to mention he's a good friend. So the from the national hunting conventions all the way to just the 7 days a week here in the shop, it's quite the business. I mean, it's a small specialized little shop that really just kind of caters to the high-end hunter. I mean, we aren't for everybody, of course, but as far as brands go, I mean, we're kind of that top shelf whiskey kind of concept. Everybody that works here hunts, especially kind of your mountainous species, sheep and goats. So the knowledge, and then of course the product selection is really kind of what we pride ourselves on, and then obviously customer service kind of takes care of itself there. But yeah, cool little shop for sure.
Yeah, no, I've spoken with Mike Morrow, who good friend, and he says your store is super sweet. That especially like you're saying, the customer service backed part of knowing what you really need to go into this mountainous terrain, because a lot of people, as you know, for being a guide, may not be prepared for Alaska in any way, shape, or form, right, to be hunting there. But at least you might give them some technical advantage with some of the gear and some of the stuff that you offer. Although we all know that there's still, even with that, maybe some that shouldn't be up there. But I think that like you're saying, that top shelf whiskey idea is it's where it's at, right? I mean, if you're going to go up there and you're going to go up and hunt Dall sheep and do these things, I mean, you need the best gear you can get, because the wilderness isn't kind to people, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the common thing we get quite often is, you definitely get some guys that come in that say, well, what's the difference between, this particular brand and, say what else is out there. I think without getting into too many brand names and things like that, I mean, at the end of the day, I'll be the first to tell you, you look at the record books, right? And you look at some of these pictures of guys back in the day, and they're wearing Carhartts and cotton flannel shirts and Trapper Nelson packs, right? So,
Right.
I think anymore, some people get it, maybe a little more caught up in it than there needs to be. I mean, I'm not going to tell you you can't do it with some of that, lower quality gear, because you can. But I think the reality would be for some of these guys and myself included, and it sounds like you and anybody, in my opinion, willing to spend the money to come to Alaska or anywhere in the world for that matter and pay for a hunt. Even for myself, to pay for the airfare and take the time off of work is, you don't want to spend that kind of time and effort on the hunt itself and then have to come home early or not be able to withstand the elements. I mean, the common thing with Alaska is, realistically, you're going to encounter some weather, and realistically, the idea that if you can have the right gear and the right equipment to get you through some of those rougher days, then you give yourself that much more opportunity. I mean, the stories of
Right.
guys shooting things on the last day of the hunt, that's not a dramatized situation. That's very, very realistic. And you have to put yourself in that situation. Are you going to be able to make it to the last day of the hunt to have that opportunity to kind of make that dream come true? Or are you going to find out day 2 or 3 that you brought the wrong equipment and it's time to go home?
Right. So, what is the number one piece of equipment you won't leave home without on a backcountry hunt? Can you give me your one, no matter what?
Yeah, that's a tough one. The first thing that comes to mind is an ultralight like guide tarp. There's plenty of brands out there that make them, but a 9.5 by 11 or a 10 by 10 ultra sil nylon guide tarp is one of those things that I think no matter what hunt I'm doing, if we were going to pick out one thing, I mean, granted, there's everything from boots to rain gear to tents to backpacks. But
Those
I
are
think
givens. Those are
right.
givens, right? We know we've got those.
But the kind of one thing I see time in and time out that, people come back and they tell me about a situation that occurred or came up and they weren't prepared for it. An ultralight guide tarp, if you don't have one in your pack, especially for Alaska, I mean, granted, I'll be the first to admit I haven't hunted all over the world, but up here, there's so many times where you find yourself either not ready to say pack your whole camp with you, but you gotta kind of take off and head somewhere, or you get caught out mid mountain, or even just for the sake of shooting things at last light. I mean, I think that's a pretty common thing no matter where you're hunting. Is animals are notorious for early morning and late evening appearances, right? And so
Right.
an ultralight guide tarp, you can make it into a glassing shelter. You can make it into obviously a survival shelter to get out of the elements, even if you had to just spend a night on the mountain. And I don't know how many nights I found myself, shooting something at last light and it just wasn't feasible or safe to try to make it back to my tent. Common thing is, guys start trying to travel at night or travel in some of this rugged terrain, and you find yourself, potentially getting into a really bad situation. So having an ultralight guide tarp, I think, is probably one of the more overlooked pieces of equipment for me when I'm packing for any type of backpack hunt here in Alaska.
Awesome. I like your answer. I couldn't agree with you more. I carry a little sheep tarp everywhere I go these days. I mean, for its ounce, it could be a life changer, no doubt about it. So one thing I found really cool about your shop is that when hunting season's over, you transform yourself into a ski shop.
Right. Yeah.
I,
Yeah, definitely a dynamic that, even for me nowadays, if I stop and just kind of look around, I kind of just have to shake it off a little bit. Like, man, it's amazing. It's amazing what we have to do to survive, and I think that that's what a lot of people don't understand about Alaska is, yes, it's a beautiful place. It's remote. It's vast. There's lots of hunting opportunities. But at the end of the day, it's winter 6 months out of the year. And so as a small business, we definitely take off. And so in the winter months of January, February, and March, we definitely take off and do your national trade shows, your hunting conventions, to kind of supplement our advertising and get out there in front of the right crowd and just be kind of with our people essentially. But
right.
Here at the shop, yeah, we're a full blown cross country ski shop, backcountry ski shop. I made the promise to Bob, the guy I bought the store from, that I would maintain the promise that he promised Barney, and basically that was maintain the roots. And not only was it from just a moral standpoint to continue that tradition on, but it's also just reality. I mean, we got to do something in the wintertime so that we can play in the summertime, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, now, so in carrying on the roots of Barney's, it's my understanding that you have specialty gear that you have branded yourself, backpacks and tents and some down pants and some things of that nature. And that
Yep.
seems like a great way to keep the roots, right? Because you're allowing yourself you're planting yourself deeper into the industry by branding stuff that you've done your own R&D on from how many years of experience through Barney's existence. Tell us a little bit about how that came about and where that's going for you.
Correct. Yeah. So, basically, again, I kind of lucked out in the sense that when I arrived here, Bob had really built up our own brand, which is called Frontier Gear of Alaska. And really what that stems from, and it's kind of the roots of the whole line really, and the future of the line. And it's that anymore, I think there's a lot of emphasis in this industry on ultralight and, counting ounces and having the lightest product out there. And I think that it's a conversation we have all the time that, you kind of have that new hunter essentially that will kind of really buy into that, this ultralight concept and, ounces count and things like that. And I think sometimes people look at our products and they go, well, man, your insulated garments, your jackets, your pants, your packs, they're heavier than the other things out there in the industry. And I think it really just takes a really experienced hunter, or even just a hunter that's willing to kind of take the blinders off from what all the other opinions out there in the industry, that, we're not trying to build the lightest product. We're trying to build a product that is going to withstand the test of time. And not only that, but just really be more built for Alaska. And so when I got here, the packs are really what we're known for. So, I mean, the Frontier Gear of Alaska, Barney's packs, those are really the kind of heart of Barney's in the hunting side of things. And those just stemmed from, guides, outfitters, guys doing solo hunts, or, two guys that want to be able to go into a remote area with everything on their back and come out with 130 pounds apiece with 2 Dall sheep in their portion of camp. And, anymore, the conversation pieces revolve around, well, how light are your packs compared to what else is out there? And man, it looks like they're a lot heavier. Well, again, the common thing I throw out there is, when you get 130, 140 pounds on your back, are you going to notice the difference between 130, 140 pounds and 3 pounds less than that, or 2 pounds less than that? I mean, at the end of the day, you need the product to be able to withstand the pack and be able to carry the weight correctly, and not have to feel like you're worried about setting it down and cracking a piece of carbon fiber or something to that nature.
So in reference, like almost like Alaska tough, right? I mean, you're talking about gear that's made for Alaska.
Exactly. Yeah, we're really not into knocking down other brands necessarily, or even more, trying to really dramatize Alaska and seem like we're dramatizing it, I guess, is more of the better way. But I mean, if you've hunted up here, I mean, obviously some parts of Canada, I'm sure, and some of those hunts and in across the world can be very similar in ruggedness. But yeah, at the end of the day, the problems that we encounter, we take a look at some of the products that are out there that we've carried in the past, and we see what people are coming back and saying. We see the problems, and we say, okay, well, we can make this product better. So we try not to take credit for all the innovation, but really what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to put the little Barney spin on this particular product. And we're going to make it the absolute best we can. And really, instead of focusing on a price point or say a pound structure of how much it weighs, we just want to say we want to build the best product we absolutely can, that we know is going to withstand the test of time and be what the hunter actually wants in the field. And if it's expensive, it's expensive. If it weighs more than what else is out there, it weighs more. It gives us a chance to have this conversation with people.
Right. Well, and I appreciate your answer because, you don't want to over dramatize Alaska. I mean, I know right here in my own neck of the woods, the Wee-Manooch has just as much ruggedness and just as much challenge as some of what you have up there. And like you say, around the world, there's different circumstances everywhere you go. There's no doubt about it. But I think that like you say, putting your spin on it, having Barney's touch on it, doing what you're doing. I mean, a lot of your R&D has been Alaska, and so therefore, there, and it's a great proving grounds, is it not? I mean, you look around the world, and that's where people point to when they want to do R&D on technical gear. It just is the place.
Right.
So, I mean, because you can be offered all 4 seasons in one 12-hour day. Correct. So it makes sense. Now, do you still make this bomb shelter tent that I've heard about? Are you guys still doing that?
So the bomb shelters, the line of bomb shelters is kind of a long lineage there in terms of how that product came to be. But definitely another one of those products that I kind of came into in terms of when I got here, that was a current product in the line. Almost immediately, I could look at it and say, well, I'd like to do a couple things to make it a little bit better. Obviously, we talk with a lot of guides, a lot of outfitters. And we get kind of their feedback on what we want to change. Now, the real problem when it comes to production, when it comes to actual, like when it's all said and done, having a product designed, fabric sourced, dyed, shipped to your factory and sewn, and then of course having that product delivered here, um, it's a lot harder than people think. And I think clothing is a whole different world. So when it comes to
Mm,
tents, we've had some serious issues with tents over the years in terms of production and delivery. And we are in the process of redesigning those bomb shelters. We're going to be adding a couple features to them, but the big problem is again production. And realistically, in the world, factories that can produce a tent like the bomb shelter, and again, not just something that looks like the bomb shelter or looks like a good tent, but that actually is. It's a whole nother story that we are working on day in and day out, trying to send samples back and forth and say change this, change that, sourcing aluminum that's going to be able to take those 80-mile-an-hour winds that we're seeing on Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula. And there's a reason why at the current moment we don't have them, and that's because I don't feel comfortable putting somebody in a tent that is subpar.
right.
And when we get them back, it'll be a big deal for us. But at the current moment, no, we do not have that line of tents because they are just not quite there. So in the future, hopefully.
Well, it's inspiring to know that you're working on it, and that we can, in the future we might be able to get our hands on one. So that would be pretty cool. So let's take a minute to kind of. I appreciate you telling us about kind of your career and where you're at and what you're doing with that. But let's rewind a little bit back to your early formative years of your childhood. We want to get to know Kevin a little bit deeper on the level of what, who, or what formed you in your early years. Do you think to make you this amazing outdoorsman that you are at this point?
Right. Yeah. I think obviously, like a lot of individuals out there, I think you could definitely take a look at my parents, right? And my mom's side of the family definitely they don't hunt, they don't fish. That wasn't introduced to me from them. My dad, a little bit so. I kind of grew up in a broken home, so I didn't see my dad all that much. But when I did see him, it was, hey, let's go fishing. Hey, let's go camping. In the fall, we would take a yearly trip and we'd go do some grouse and upland bird hunting. And never really got into the big game hunting too much with him. But the minute I hit 14 years old, I was out there trying it out on my own. I mean, started duck hunting on my own. Then I started black bear hunting on my own, caribou hunting. And, realistically, I think we're all very fortunate if we're able to say we, one, have a parent that's influenced us, but two, I think it's kind of a roll the dice game on who you grow up with. So,
Mm-hmm.
friend wise. And I was lucky enough to have a group of friends that all like to, kind of get outdoors and fish and hunt, and it just kind of fueled the fire. I mean, if I would have lucked out, or been unlucky and had a friend, a friend group that didn't like to do those things, I might have been handicapped a little bit, and maybe I didn't end up the way I am now. But lucky enough to do obviously a little bit with my dad, friends, and then of course when I met the outfitter that I ended up working for, very fortunate that he kind of took me under his wing and said, "Hey, I'm about to show you a world that will change your life forever." And I remember the first time flying into the Brooks Range on a 185 bush plane. As soon as we landed, the first words he said to me was, basically, you're going to be hooked for life. And I spent 6 weeks my first year up there, and it was the best 6 weeks of my life. That realistically took me from, well, this is going to just be a part-time thing for the summer and I'm going to be off to college, to like, this is what I want to surround my life with.
Right. So that definitely sounds like the most memorable wilderness experience of your life. Would you say that was it, or do you possibly have another one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just, I mean, that's really the strike of the match there, and then it just kind of, not necessarily in a bad way, but snowballs from there. I mean, once you kind of get a taste of that kind of fly in slash backpack in sheep and goat and caribou and bear hunting, it's just there's countless experiences. But yes, that would be the one that really was kind of like, this is what I've been missing in my life. And I think anybody that's been into a place like the Brooks Range, or like you had mentioned, there's places like that where you live, that once you kind of crest that peak of looking over into just an uncharted wilderness, and kind of having that idea that there realistically may not have ever been a person where you're standing.
Right.
I think it kind of just, if you have any kind of desire to do it, it just hooks you. And it's almost unexplainable to people who don't share that passion.
Right. What is it about the Alaska wilderness that gives you that rush or that connection to it? Is that it? Being able to be standing somewhere where no one else possibly has, or is there, what else is there that just gives you that rush and passion?
Yeah, I think just the adventure itself. I mean, when you get dropped off and you watch that plane fly away, I think it really tests who you are. But if you're willing to accept the challenge, I think it definitely kind of gives you that feeling of, it's about as close as you can get as where I would say mankind started. And I think that's what kind of gives me the rush is, you've got enough stuff on your back to survive for 10 to 15 days. And you're going to spend those next 10, 15 days covering more elevation, more miles than you ever will in the other 11 calendar months. And just being on your own and being self-sustainable and living off the land, I think that's kind of what gets everybody, even if it's not for 10 days, even if it's just for a weekend and you get out somewhere. And it doesn't even mean you have to fly in, right? But I think we've all kind of felt that, hey, we're on our own, and we're going to have to be self-sustainable. And especially in Alaska, knowing that every step you take in one direction, you're going to have to take that same step back. So, if you want to venture out 15, 20 miles, you got to make that trip back, and potentially with a lot heavier pack. So it's all a game
Right.
of, what the human body and mind can do. And I think that's kind of what drives me to see how far you can go.
Right. Now, you've recently been venturing out by yourself, doing more solo stuff. We know that presents, more constraints and challenges being by yourself. You've had some successful hunts, but you found that your reasoning for why you wanted to go solo hunt has changed. What changed? What's your reasoning change there?
Well, I mean, I think to explain that, you kind of have to start with my original reasoning, and that was, sometimes you just, you don't have the ability to take someone with you, whether your schedules just don't line up, or, maybe you just can't find a good hunting partner. I think we all know the struggles of finding a good hunting partner, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad hunter necessarily, but maybe just doesn't jive with who you are and what you like to do and your style. But, at the end of the day, once I kind of ventured out by myself and realized that I could do it, yeah, it was the challenge of like, wow, I've now achieved this goal of being able to go out on my own for 10 days and actually harvest a quality mature animal, and then get out of there alive, unscathed, and have something to look back on. And now it's just how much more can I do, and how far can I go? And, again, I would love to share the experience with people, whether it's my wife, if I came across the right hunting partner. But I think that's really the big conversation nowadays is you spend all year planning these hunts. You spend all year dreaming about, your maybe only one allotted time in the mountains, and who do you take with you? And, has it put a sour taste in your mouth by taking someone with you that wasn't prepared? And I think that's really a lot of rooted from those guiding days of having to really drag someone up the mountain sometimes. And you just kind of wonder what brings people into that scenario. So yeah, I think that's the big one.
Well, you sent in your bio a really interesting thing that I read, and it says ultimately finding the right hunting partner can be about as hard as finding a soulmate. And to my listeners, I know that we all know exactly what you're talking about. And what what are the qualities of a good hunting partner for you?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. And I think that it's going to differ from person to person. But I think if we all broke it apart, um, I would say nowadays the one point that I like to make with people is it's not all about the harvest. And if you can't if you can't set foot into the mountains and not worry about the money spent, the time away, and you can't just enjoy it for what it is, and be okay with not coming home with something, then you probably shouldn't go. And that's easier
That's
said
right.
than done. But I think nowadays you look at the amount of money spent, right? It's not cheap for anybody to go, and we've all kind of spent the same amount of money to go in. And I think the problems that everybody incurs is well, who gets to shoot, and well, I wasn't successful, and people change real quick when it comes to you know, it's only explainable to those who have experienced it, but definitely a factor that for a good hunting partner, I would say it would have to be something along the lines of, um, you can't be greedy. You have to find someone that's more about the adventure than you are, essentially, which is sometimes hard to
Right.
find.
I think you're right. And I think that for me this last year, simple communication skills need to be acquired prior to the moment. That was one of the biggest things I found this year hunting with some new people. That was probably the frustrating part for me. Although personality wise, we jive very well, styles were right. Um, what we're trying to accomplish was in the same textbook, but um, having some clear communication skills was a big one for me this year. I'll tell you that. Um,
Right.
how does helping and watching your wife be successful in her wilderness adventures make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of a borderline thing that I see quite a bit with wives and kids and things like that. And I think it's a whole nother conversation in terms of, you know, you get somebody that's been successful, and then now they want to almost live through their wife or live through their kids. And I think there's some responsibility there, and I take a real pride in that responsibility, in that I didn't start out hunting Dall sheep, right? I started out with small game, and I think it's important to kind of learn the benefits of one, taking a life, and understanding that it can be hard. If you've ever watched someone even shoot a grouse or a duck for the first time, I think if you don't have a little remorse, then there's something wrong, right? I mean, we're
Right.
harvesting wild animals, and
Yeah.
so with my wife, I've watched her grow. We started with grouse, we worked our way up. She shot her first black bear out in Prince William Sound. When within the first couple of years of us being together, and then she went to a caribou, and then we hunted Dall sheep, and she harvested a mountain goat a couple of years ago. And so just watching that progression of not starting at the top, and kind of learning that along many of those hunts, there's been a lot of heartache. There's been a lot of sweat, blood, tears, both good and bad. And I think that how I enjoy watching it through my wife is watching her grow, watching her appreciate it for what it is, not just putting her on a trophy animal and saying, "All right, go for it," and then I can go back to my buddies or my social media and say, "My wife killed the hardest animal to kill in Alaska." It's to me,
Right.
it's not about that. It's so much more. It's so much more about teaching somebody the foundation of hunting and conservation, and the reality that there's going to be a lot more failures than there are successes, and that's what makes those highs so high.
Right. Well, you sound like you did it the right way. A great teacher and a great mentor for her. And does she have the qualities of a good hunting partner?
For sure, and I think naturally, when you're hunting with your family or your wife, at least for me personally, I can tell you I'm not going to say it's not enjoyable, but it's a little bit more stressful. And I think anybody that maybe has kids or that has done the same thing, you're always kind of worried about how she's doing and or how he is doing type of thing if it's one of your kids. But the qualities I think incur from she just wants almost me to be happy, right? So you take a look at it and she's not saying anything and she's not complaining and she's not, you just give her a warm sleeping bag and a hot meal and hot cocoa and she's good to go, right? Um,
That's
but
cool.
she's got some of the better qualities for sure, and I think that the difference between, say, a hunting partner that's you're not related to would be that between my wife and I, she doesn't mind who shoots, she doesn't mind if we're successful. She just wants to be with me, and that's really that statement about you got to find
Yeah.
someone that's just like that really just whoever shoots, whoever harvests, it would be our animal anyways. Whether she shot it or I
Exactly.
shot it, like we were successful. And I think
Right.
that, or we failed. We do everything
Right.
together, and that's really that. I think the key to success with any hunting partner, whether it's your wife or your best friend, you have to be willing to come home with nothing, or if you come home with one animal, not be upset that well I didn't shoot it. It's not about that, in my
No.
opinion.
No. There's so much joy in being a team because it is a team effort, no matter how you look at it, right?
Right.
And for her to want to be by your side and go do this and be receptive and grow through the natural progression speaks volumes for her as well, not just yourself, right? As a team, and
Right.
it'll be cool that you're going to have a third member to your team. That'll be kind of interesting, right?
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
So, what is it about the Dall sheep? What is it? I haven't got to hunt one, so I don't know. What is this
Right.
bug?
Well,
You
and
know?
I think we go back to this old statement of sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot, because you explain too much about it, and then you encourage more and more and more hunters, right? And then it becomes
True.
you're fighting through it. But at the end of the day, a Dall sheep. I've talked with a lot of hunters from around the globe, and for the bow hunters out there who have been right there within 15, 20 yards of a screaming bull elk, that feeling that you get of harvesting a big elk, it's very similar with Dall sheep. I think, for a lot of the Midwest, if I had to guess, harvesting a bull elk with a bow is about as dominant as you can be in terms of like bucket lists. And unfortunately, I've never had that opportunity, but when I see people talk about elk and screaming bulls, I see the same fire in their eyes and I can hear it in their voice as Dall sheep. Dall sheep
Gotcha.
is just one of those things. There's not a lot of them. They
Right.
live in they live in some very, very rugged country. They're one of the smartest animals out there. I mean, realistically, once you figure out how to hunt them, just like anything else, it's not really about harvesting one. It's about finding a mature one at that point.
Right.
But yeah, it's just tough. The restrictions on them are tough. Again, that atmosphere of flying in on a super cub, kind of the ultimate Alaska bush plane, getting dropped off, putting on, anywhere from 60 to 100 miles with everything that you need to survive on your back, and then coming home with potentially, a set of horns that has more history engraved in their annuli rings and from fighting and surviving the harsh winters. And I think it's just every state probably has something similar that has hunting. There's that pinnacle animal within every
Right.
region, and for Alaska, it's just the Dall sheep is it. And I think if Dall sheep lived in other parts of the U.S., you and I would be having this conversation about Dall sheep in your area, and you'd say, "I
Right.
get it."
Now, a few days ago, well, it's been a few days, but you posted on Instagram something about bucket lists. You had a very emotional post that really made me think about my day to day life and a little bit about where my bucket list sits. And I loved how you described how most people think of a bucket list as something that you make a bucket list when you're 60, right? Because it's all the stuff you didn't get to do in your life. But
Yeah.
in reality, maybe bucket lists shouldn't be these major events. Maybe they should be smaller events, and they should start sooner in your life, I think, and work through it. And um, you said take time to enjoy life. Make a bucket list now. Don't bury it back in a bucket. Start living, right?
Right.
Face
Right.
reality today, because there may not be a tomorrow. And that was extremely empowering for me. And so I had to share that with the listeners, but I'd like them to hear from you, where that generated from your heart, because it definitely is good stuff.
Yeah, I think just like I said, I think, growing up and even before this experience here a couple weeks ago, a bucket list is kind of one of those things, it's you don't really think about it until later on in life, and at least for most people, it seems like. And I think we're all kind of exposed to death in general, right? I mean, passing on, and I mean, whether it's an animal or whether it's a loved one or a friend. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to watch somebody kind of get that fear of there may not be a tomorrow in them, and start hammering out a bucket list, and instead of just going, man, I think that's great, and let's do it. I thought about my own life, and I thought about, well, geez, why should we wait till we're on our deathbeds, essentially, to develop one of these lists of things that you'd like to do. And I think that if it's just one person that saw my post, or one person that hears this that says, I think I'm been kind of maybe a little lackadaisical. Maybe I'm going to make my own too and start working on it. And like you had said, it doesn't have to be huge, unaccomplishable things. Like I think the iconic ones are skydiving and doing things that you may
Bungee
not do.
jumping.
You may not do anyways because you're scared to die, type of thing. But I
Right.
think the funnier, or the more realistic thing would be, is there a hunt that you want to do? There's some goals that you want to accomplish, a peak that you want to climb, something new you want to try? And for me, definitely relating it to my family, and then hunting in general, and just day-to-day life. It goes by too fast, and so
Right.
I'm very fortunate to have you know kind of experienced that with a good friend, and saw him achieve a bucket list goal, and saw what it did for him individually, and made me want to make one of my own.
Right. Well, it's a super empowering post, that's for sure. And I think that you know, the bucket list, like you say, it could be this hunt, could be this peak, could be these things. But for me, there's a certain sides to my bucket list. There's an adventurous side, and then there's a relationship side, and those are equally important to me more and more as I grow older, to try to accomplish that balance. So I think that that's from my point of view, that's important. Um,
Yeah.
we're growing close on time here for yourself. You gotta get the store opened up, but I need to ask a question about you. Recently went on a caribou hunt, and a solo caribou hunt, and there was some talk about the fact that you made a runway for this plane to land to pick up you and your caribou. Take me
Right.
through this adventure real quick, because that
Right.
just sounds pretty cool.
Well, logistics, right? Logistics in any hunt, I think, are definitely a key aspect to not only be successful, but to be, what would be the term, just responsible. And so, Dall sheep, caribou, whether it may be a deer, those are things that you can feasibly, debone, essentially, and you could make one big long trip out to where you need to get to. But logistics come in a little bit with animals like caribou and moose in Alaska, because they're such big animals. And in most places, you cannot debone the meat for whatever reason. There's lots of different fish and game reasons. But so, when you're talking about an animal that on the hoof is 350 pounds or 300 pounds, you gotta think logistics a little bit. And so for me, unfortunately, weather kind of played a part in where I had to initially land in the Super Cub and get kind of dropped off.
Right.
And being by myself, of course, I landed a lot lower than I would have liked. But that's such as life and such as hunting. I mean, I was fortunate enough to get at least that head start, and so full camp on my back, for a couple days, headed up into some of the more alpine where these caribou live. And, you start looking at the GPS and you're a mile and a half away, 2 miles away from your airstrip and another 2,000 feet down. So when you're having to make 2 or 3 trips, logistics start kind of playing in on whether it's responsible to harvest an animal or not. And so knowing what these planes can do, if you're not familiar with Super Cubs, they're just unbelievable bush hunting machines, basically. And so, yeah, I had to kind of I saw a couple good bulls, and I had to kind of think, well, I mean, what's realistic here? And luckily, there's a lowland kind of valley, and kind of I had to cut down a couple alders and move some rocks and things like that. But knowing the paces of in terms of how many feet these airplanes need, especially loaded heavy. Just paced it out and had to kind of create my own runway to make sure I could get a pilot in there and successfully get this animal out of there, or else I would have had to make that decision probably at that point not to pull the trigger.
Right. I think that what's important about having a good wilderness attitude, right, is having adaptability and the foresight to understand and adapt to those challenges that you were presented with, right? I mean,
Right.
I mean, I don't know, were you a Boy Scout growing up? Because that's like, you know, the real
Yeah, I mean,
deal,
nothing against Boy Scouts, but no, I wasn't. I was not a Boy Scout.
right?
My parents did not put me into Boy Scouts for whatever reason. And I think maybe it was because of where I was actually growing up. I mean,
Yeah,
growing up, I know we all kind of look back and we say, well, I never grew up looking at iPads and playing Xbox and things like that. And I mean, truthfully, I grew up kind of out in the outskirts of town, and I would go fishing down in a creek by where we lived, and skinning up my knees and climbing trees, and coming home soaking wet and shivering, and kind of learning how to kind of grow up in a place like this. I just didn't need the Boy Scouts push, and I
no,
think there's a lot of
right.
kids out there that can benefit from Boy Scouts. But for me, yeah, man, just kind of, luck of the draw and where I grew up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of referencing the Boy Scouts in that, in their motto more than
Right.
anything, you know what I mean? But,
Yeah.
you know,
Gotcha.
yeah, to each their own in that department, but you're absolutely right. I mean, where you were raised in the wilderness and how you were created, you absolutely didn't need that. You didn't need that hand or that club to become super successful at what you do. And we're kind of out of time, but I really want to thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate your ability to express to us, what it's like to be in Alaska and what it's like to be where you're at and how you came to be who you are. And we really look forward to following more of what you do. Um, in the end, if you want the best backcountry gear and you're in it for Alaska and hunting, Barney's Sports Chalet is the place to be. We all know that Kevin and his crew will take good care of you and lead you in the right direction to be as successful as they can help you be. But give me the top 3 things, Kevin, that people need to prepare before they come walking in your shop to go do their Alaska hunt.
As far as gear, is that what you mean? Or
Nope, just their top. What are the top 3 things? You've been a guide. You've taken your wife in the backcountry, so you got experience with men, women, children. I mean, what people that are coming to Alaska to go backcountry hunt? What are the 3 things they better be? They better have done prior to even walking in your store.
well, you better have done your research on, not only quality gear and equipment, but just the expense alone. And you got to have that mindset if you get what you pay for. If you don't have that mindset, even if it's just in the booking of things for your hunt, you gotta know that you get what you pay for. So that would be the number one thing, is just have that mindset of, you know, you gotta prepare for the hunt itself gear wise. Now the second thing would be mental, right? So the mental side of things, that, you know, a lot of times you can't just say, okay, well, I'm good mentally, right? I mean, we see that time in and time out, but the mental side of
Right.
things is huge. You know, you have to be able to take out the money, take out the time. You gotta be doing it for the right reason. So mentally, you have to be coming up here or going into the field knowing that you may not be successful in terms of an actual harvest. You have to be able to see more. You have to be able to see success in more things than just the actual harvest, and pulling the
Right.
trigger. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And then the third thing, you know, that's a tough one. I mean, in terms of overall, but you know, definitely, you know, back to kind of one of the points that we had talked about, who you take into the field, and be responsible for the decisions you make, you know, in terms of, you know, whether that person is mentally prepared, physically prepared, but also to, you know, just be responsible, to, you know, the idea that you're heading into a place that is very unforgiving. And that's that whole finding your soulmate thing. You know, you're almost better off if you think you're mentally and physically ready to go and you have the right gear. Don't drag somebody in there, especially if it's a lifelong dream, right?
Right. Yeah, I feel you. Well, thank you, sir. I
Yeah, I
appreciate it, and
appreciate
I think, you know, at some point in time we're gonna have to meet each other. I'll be up there here in Alaska soon, and I'll get a chance to meet you in person. And then at that point, we'll sit down and talk about Dall sheep and Colorado elk and how these two things can come together between the two of us.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Awesome. That sounds great. You have a great Friday, a great weekend, and we really appreciate it, Kevin. And do you have anybody you want to shout out to anybody? Anything you want to thank anybody for anything?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, thanks for everybody that's watching, I suppose. Kate for setting it up, Mike for the opportunity, and his wife, for kind of, you know, coming in and just kind of asking me to be a part of it. You know, granted, it's very humbling. I don't really see myself as a standout type of person in the industry, but definitely, you know, if people are interested in what I've done, or if I can help someone with gear, I appreciate that opportunity to have those conversations. I love meeting new people. So,
Right on. And where can people find you?
well, as far as Barney's goes, we have a website. We'll be at most of the national hunting conventions here this January, February. Myself personally, I'm obviously on Facebook, Instagram, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions about Alaska or just gear in general.
Sounds good. Well, I want to give a shout out to your crew there. Shout out to your wife and your beautiful daughter, Wyatt. Thanks for your time. Have
All
yourself a
right.
great one. We'll talk to you
You
soon.
too. Thanks.
All right. Bye bye. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I sure hope you're enjoying them. These series on Alaska have been great. I appreciate every one of you as a listener. You know, I hope you guys are enjoying what we're doing. You know, I don't get a lot of feedback, so I need you listeners to go out there. I need you to blow me up here a little bit. I need you to blow up my email. I need you to blow up reviews, iTunes, Podbean, our website, whatever. Get a hold of me and tell me if we're two thumbs up or if we suck, because we're going to continue to do these segments of areas and places and people and different things in the wilderness and the outdoors, and we want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what you want. This podcast is for you, the listener. It's for you to enjoy when you have the time, and it's for us to empower you, give you information, give you, you know, adventures and stories, these men and women who live in the spirit of the wilderness, no matter what they're doing. So hit me, would you? Hit me with your best shot. I want to know what's going on out there. This is Brandon Waddell, your host of Wilderness Attitude. Thanks for tuning in.